Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the minister of the Portia Church of Christ, and it's so good to have you here for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study. I believe this is episode 46. Episode 46, and we wanted to let you know that if you are watching it with us right now, or if you're watching this on the replay, we thoroughly appreciate your presence and your willingness to come study with us. We always want to try to come to a better understanding of the Word of God and just study the Scriptures together. And I'm thankful we have a means to do that, and so we're thankful that you're here. I know here around Portia, we've had snow, and more snow. People have experienced a lot of cold weather, a lot of snow in the past couple of days, and so a lot of people have been kind of staying in and kind of riding the storm out. But if you had to travel, if you had to get out during this time, hope that you stay safe. I hope everything goes well for you. I hope that you're looking forward to a strong finish, to this week. We always want to let you know that you are welcome to come and visit us at the Portia Church of Christ. Right now, we are meeting on 10 o'clock on Sunday morning and 11 o'clock for worship service, 10 o'clock for Bible class, 11 o'clock for worship service, and on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock for our midweek assembly. You're always invited, and we would love to be able to worship with you and love to be able to talk with you and just be able to sing praises to God and to study God together. That's a wonderful thing that we as Christians can do. And so we always want to let you know that you are welcome to come join us. But other than that, we're going to get started with this episode tonight. We have a special guest with us. We have Kiefer Calaway Ramsey. He is here with us, and he's going to be joining us for this episode. I know you're going to appreciate his perspective and his thoughts on our study. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17 tonight, and studying the life of David, specifically his encountering with the giant Goliath. But Kiefer, it's so good to have you here tonight. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you've been doing lately?
Well, obviously my name is Kiefer Calaway Ramsey, as Seth pointed out. No one ever calls me by my middle name. If I get called by my middle name, it's usually because I'm in trouble. So it's kind of different to hear my middle name actually spoken out loud. I've been a recruiter for Crowley's Ridge alma mater college for her. This is rocking on my third year. So I like to use the fancy name admissions representative. It makes me feel, I guess, fancier. But I guess I'm originally from Elkins, Arkansas. Don't know if you know where that is from. It's east of Fayetteville. So if you've ever been in that area, it's not too far. It's about 3,000 people or so. But myself, Wilson Teague and Chris Hughes, we work in the admissions department there at Crowley's, and so we've been just trying to hold it down. And one of the biggest things we do is get into the churches, and we haven't really been able to do that with coronavirus. Go to schools, haven't been able to do that with the coronavirus. So it's been a real struggle for our whole admissions department, and just trying to change the culture of the school, get more Church of Christ students or non-athletes into the school. On the side, most Sundays I preach at Manila Church of Christ, right there off Highway 18, going towards Blytheville. I've been doing that for, I guess since 2014, not specifically at Manila, but I've been going out for Art Smith for the college since then. But I've been specifically going to Manila for about 2.5-3 years. I am married, as you saw the picture. That's my beautiful wife, Tara. If you know Art Smith, that's not to claim him as my own, but he is my grandfather-in-law. So that's, and we also have 2 dogs. So we don't have children yet, but I guess dogs count, right? Some people think they do. So Heidi and Blue. So that's a short introduction for you.
And I actually, in 2010 to 2012, I led singing over there at Manila, and so
really?
I know the people over there really well. It's a small congregation, but it's got good people.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also know, being from Elkins, you're a big Hogs fan over there.
Yeah,
and so,
for sure.
I'll always cheer for them on Saturdays. But
Mm-hmm.
well, what have you been teaching on lately over there at Manila?
Well, we have actually been going through the book of Mark for the past. They're probably getting tired of me dragging it out, but we're doing an expository study, more of a verse by verse over the book of Mark. Sometimes I believe that we get caught up in doing topical sermons. There's nothing wrong with topical sermons. I love topical sermons, and they're good in their own. But I typically, or personally, I learn better by an expository study, a verse by verse. Why is this happening? Why are these things occurring? And then piecing it all together to see a beautiful picture. And I think Mark does the best job of the Gospels. I've heard people say over and over that Mark is like the ESPN of the Gospels. It's like the highlight reel. And so I know the college, our new campus ministry is they started studying Mark, and I went to the first session, and I said, this would be really good for me to study at Manila. So that's kind of what sparked that.
It sounds like they're getting some good lessons down there. I know
Yeah.
Mark's a great study.
Yeah.
But I didn't put this on what I gave you, but could you tell us how the school's doing right now with how Curly's faring
Yeah.
with the school year?
Yeah, we are actually up in enrollment. I mean, I guess we should brag about that. It was 6 people, but it was 6 people. But we've been fairly safe. We've had a couple cases, but nothing where the whole school was quarantined or isolated or anything like that. But we have had a couple cases in ball teams where students would have to isolate or quarantine because of one particular student getting it. But we've not had too awfully too many cases there at the college. I would say we probably had 15 to 20 positive cases at the college, and the rest of them were just close contacts, and they had to quarantine because of that case. So besides that, we've been pretty nice. We've been very blessed to not have very many.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing well, and we appreciate you being here tonight. I know we have 2 people that have chimed in already. We have Janet Deloche, who says that John and Janet are watching. It's good to have you here tonight. I know you guys are faithful watchers, and we appreciate you being here. And we have Tom and Billy Gale. They are Tom's an elder at Portia, and so it's good to have you guys here tonight as well. But as we always say, we want you, if you're watching this, we want you to be able to participate in this study. And so if you have a comment or a question about what we're talking about what we're studying, then I encourage you to put it down in the comments, put it down in the section there, and let us know what you think about the story and what you think about this study. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to study with you for this study tonight. And also, if you ever need further explanation, or if you ever have any questions about what we say tonight, then please feel free to get in contact with us as well. We would love to talk to you about it. But we're going to study 1 Samuel chapter 17 tonight. 1 Samuel chapter 17. And it's the story that really puts one of the most famous characters in the Old Testament on the map. David is someone who we have a lot of information on. He's someone who plays a big role in the history of Israel and in the Old Testament. He shows up. He plays a big part in the in 1st and 2nd Samuel, and he's someone who has a big impact on Israel as a whole. And we know there's a lot that we can learn from him. There's a lot of cases in which he looks, really, really good, and there's a lot of cases where he looks, really, really bad as well. And so he's an example that we can look at, and which we can take a lot of lessons from. And so, Kiefer, what are some of your introductory thoughts when you first think about this man David and what he does in the scriptures and in what he means to us today? What are just some first thoughts that come to your mind when you hear the name David?
Well, as I was telling you, David is one of my favorite subjects we study throughout the Bible, and I say that because he messes up. And a lot of times we as Christians, we talk about all the right things that we should do, all the things that we need to do to make us a good Christian, to go to church services, to study our Bibles, to pray fervently, to be faithful. But we get so caught up in those things that we forget that we're human, and that when we do mess up, that we need to have people around us. We need to have Nathans in our life to hold us accountable, our Nathans in our lives to rebuke us, and us take that and heal from it. And I think David is a perfect example of that, being rebuked, being told that he was wrong for the things that he did, and to try to change that. And so I love that about David, because I know I'm not perfect. And when I can read something about someone who is called a man after God's own heart, and him not be perfect either, I know that I've got a better chance, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that people who aren't even Christians, people who maybe don't know much about Christianity, one of the things that float around is David, a man after God's own heart. That's the first thing that most people always hear, a man after God's own heart. And 1 Samuel 13, verse 14, would you pop that up for us, Seth? 1 Samuel 13, verse 14, it says, but now your kingdom shall, I'll read it off here, but now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be your prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And that's being spoken to Saul, because we know time after time, he's always messing up. He's so proud that he doesn't follow what God wants him to do, but he follows his own way of thinking. God has already made him the king of Israel, but he wants to be the King of Kings. He wants to be the Lord of Lords. He wants to be above everyone else. And so God eventually is fed up with that. But yeah, the first thing you see that in that verse, it says, Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and that's David.
Yeah, and you can take a look at the process in which David was chosen. We know that before the story, before 1 Samuel 17, David is anointed as king over Israel. He's anointed by the prophet Samuel, and Samuel had a different view of what a king was, and what God wanted in a king. He looked at these people who looked the part, people who looked like they would make project a good image for a king, and but God said that's not who I want. And he gets down to David, one of the smallest of the few, and he was the one that ended up being chosen because, like this verse says, he was a man after God's own heart. And so that is usually the phrase that we hear about a man like David, which is interesting because when you think about how incredible that is to have something like that attached to your name when you're remembered, in history, that's an incredible thing to have attached to your name, to be someone who's known as, someone after God's own heart. Mm-hmm. And even after, like you said, after all the mistakes that he made, he's still someone who came back to God. He still came back, came back to him, and I think that's a big part of David's story, is that issue of the heart. He always knew where to go back when he messed up, and which is, I think, it's a big part of his story. And we know that Saul, it's interesting to look at Saul when you can kind of see like a progression, like a downward progression. If he starts good and then he starts to go downhill with the decisions that he makes, and for eventually God cuts it off and says, I'm putting in someone new, someone who's going to seek after me instead of seeking after his own glory. And of course that's what he did. And so David was really someone who was chosen by God as someone who was going to be a good ruler. And we could go into a whole nother discussion about what makes a good leader, what makes a good ruler. And I think David fits a lot of those good qualities. But he's definitely, an interesting character to look at as someone who has that tagline, associated with him.
Yeah. One of the things I thought with that is Saul hands it to David by the things that he does. If you look back in 1 Samuel 15, he messes up royally, and the biggest part which Saul struggles with and which we struggle with as Christians today is sin as self-deceit, sin as self-deception. He sees a problem, he sees an issue, but he turns a blind eye. He decides not to allow himself to see the things that he does wrong, or not to allow himself to see the things that are going wrong in the camp, or when they went in to take the king, and God tells him to wipe literally everything out. This is in 1 Samuel 15, a summary of it. But to wipe everything out in to wipe everyone out in 1 Samuel 15, and he doesn't. He takes sheep, he takes oxen, he takes the king, and it's self-deception. That's what it is. It's self-deceit. He makes excuses. He blames other people. If you look in the text, he'll go and he say, "Well, it was the soldiers that brought along the oxen. It was the soldiers that decided to do that. I had nothing to do with it." And so he plays this game of self-deception. Sin is self-deceit, and he falls into a ploy, and he that's the downfall of him.
And that can be something that can be easy to fall into. I mean, that's a trap that it's easy to look at. And I think another thing, that idea of responsibility, taking responsibility for your mistakes, or for your sin, or for the things that you do. I think I agree with you. I think that was missing in Saul. I think that was a very large part about his downfall, and because he wouldn't, like you said, he wouldn't take that responsibility. And while David was someone who did, if you read throughout the Psalms, some of the Psalms are very passionate cries, for a relationship with God, for sometimes it's for forgiveness, sometimes it's for purification. We're familiar with the Psalm, create in me, a clean heart, oh God. It's something that is a part. I think it is a part of David. Looking at taking that responsibility, which is absent, like you said, absent in the previous ruler, and that plays a big part in it. But if we take a look at this this battle here in 1 Samuel chapter 17, this is a case in which it's Israel versus the Philistines. The Philistines would be an enemy in Israel's side for a very long time. They'd be a serious problem for them for a considerable amount of time. And in this case, we find them facing off yet again. And David is someone who's a little late to the party, but they're already squaring off and going after. The battle hasn't actually started yet. They're at a standoff, but yet this is something that has some pretty significance with it, as you could tell with Saul being there, physically, the king being there. You can tell that this is a pretty significant battle. But in your mind, what is the importance of this battle here? The significance of this face-off between the Israelites and the Philistines that we find here in 1 Samuel chapter 17.
Well, we know the outcome, obviously, so we know that obviously David comes out triumphant. But the most important thing that we see from this, in my opinion, is that if you know anything about the Philistines, they don't believe in God. They don't believe in a singular one God who rules over everything. They believe in multiple gods. And so this victory would have let them know, all of Philistia know, that there is a God. There's a God, and that he is with the people of Israel. And we do not need to mess with these people anymore. So there's a spiritual battle that's going on that is above we read things in the Bible, what's going on, but the spiritual battle, that there's a God, and this God is with these people, and so we really don't need to mess with them anymore. Not only that, we see with David doing this, the people who have chosen King Saul are really seeing who their king is, who they've chosen to be king is, who is cowering behind this boy who's now anointed to be king. They're cowering behind, or he's cowering, or supposed to be leading this group of men, and instead of leading them, he has cowered behind what we read as this young boy, or this teenage boy, David. And David triumphs, and David triumphs because he has a relationship with God, and he has all of this trust and this hope that God is going to provide. And now the Philistines see this spiritual battle taking place as well, that, wow, they actually, this God they talk about is real.
That's very interesting, when you look at that, because like you think like there's like I said, like there's going to be a physical confrontation, but there's so much more attached to that physical confrontation than just who gets this piece of land, or who gets all this treasure. But like you said, there's an idea of Israel is kind of the representative of God. They're often referred to as God's chosen people. They're representing God, and it's and so if that they might say, well, if we're able to defeat these people, if we're able to run over them and subjugate them, then their God must be weak, or their God must not even exist. And so it's definitely a showdown. And I think this is something that is reinforced by the statements that David makes when he goes out there and fights Goliath. One that we'll probably look at a little bit later. But yeah, this was a fight, and I think it's it was a fight for independence. Israel didn't want to be subjugated to the Philistines. Obviously, they had to deal a lot with that throughout their history. They didn't want to be oppressed by them. They had just gotten a new king, and this was one of the things they mentioned about having a king. Is they said, we want someone to lead us in war. We want someone to lead us in battle. And like you mentioned, when we find him in this case, he's not exactly passing the test. He's not exactly rising to the occasion. I mean, there's a big sense of fear about what's going on. But this new system of government that Israel has set up, they're trying to protect that, along with of course the status of God, and then the reputation of God. You might put that in those terms. And so this is I do think this is a pretty significant battle. And when you take a look at the timing in which this takes place in Israel's history.
Yeah, one of the things you'll see throughout the text is when the standoff. I know you mentioned this, the standoff between David and Goliath. Goliath is slandering God's name. Not only that, he is ridiculing David. He is saying, "You're just a boy with a stick. There is nothing that you're going to do. I could literally squash you with my two fingers. What do you think? I'm just a little dog? Like, you come at with me with sticks?" Like, he is ridiculing David, but he's also ridiculing the very heart of God. He's calling him out and shaming their God in front of all of his people.
Yeah, and that's a that's a big part of it, and because it's impossible. I guess what we can say is it's impossible to separate God from Israel, because and well, what would happen was Goliath, this Philistine champion, this giant of a man, this warrior, would come out and he would taunt Israel. He would be someone who would like you said, he would slander God, and he would throw insults, and he would challenge someone to come out there and face him. And I've got a couple of pictures here. This takes place in the when we're called the Valley of Elah, and it's a place that was about 20 miles, I think, from Jerusalem, and there's two hills on each side, and there's a valley down below, if to kind of get a reference for it. And this is a picture of one of the sides of the valley. You can see here how steep the hills were, and how kind of the height you would have for this showdown. And it makes sense, why someone like Goliath would come out and make this challenge, because if you see the hills like this, and here's another picture, you can kind of see how they slope back. If you were someone that tried to charge right up that hill, then you most likely wouldn't get very far. The army that had the high ground would have an enormous advantage over someone that was advancing. So neither side really wanted to take the offensive in this case, but rather Goliath's solution to this problem was that he was going to come out and he was going to challenge one individual, and if Goliath won, then they would give automatically award the victory to the Philistines. And if the Israelite won, then they would give Israel the victory, and kind of settle it all with just one quick battle. But the problem was no one wanted to take on a man the size of Goliath. And the Bible details the armament that he had, the armor and the shield and the spear and the javelin that he carried, and it's pretty intimidating. I know myself, I would not want to face someone of that size, but this is kind of the situation in which they were in, and it kind of gives some context to why they're having this individual showdown and this battle that they have. But as we're about to see, David is going to arrive on the scene. He's going to come there to take his brothers some food, and take his brothers a captain some food, presents from his father. And he's going to witness this. He's going to hear what Goliath has to say, and then it's not going to set well with him. But so he's going to hear this, and it's, like I said, it's not going to set well with him, and he's going to end up asking around. He's going to asking people, just what would a person get if they were able to pull this off, if they were able to defeat this giant, this Philistine. And of course, imagine that the situation that they were in, that the reward was pretty great. It would be a lot of honor. It would be they say that Saul would give his daughter in marriage, and so to David, this seemed like a pretty big opportunity, but it's not an opportunity that a lot of people, I don't think, would take. And so if we take a look at this man, David, he's young at this point. He's referred to as a youth, but I don't believe he's all that young. I think that he's fight. At least he's someone who could hold himself in a fight, even though he was referred to as a youth. But what are some qualities about David when we take a look at him that we can learn from, that we can see as an example, see as something that we can maybe emulate, or what are some lessons you think we can learn from this man, David?
I'm not trying to be cliche, but obviously never judge a book by its cover. And that's not just speaking in the Bible or in terminology of sticking straight to the Bible, but in our everyday lives. So a lot of times we'll see someone who maybe doesn't look like us, or maybe doesn't have as nice as clothes as we do, or maybe they don't speak very kindly. Maybe they have never had any structure and they've never been told otherwise that cursing is bad, and society-wise, it's becoming more of the norm of cursing is fine. But the list can go on and on and on about not judging a book by its cover, not knowing what it's like to walk in another man's shoes, that kind of philosophy. But that's all of these people. They're like, we're terrified. We don't want to fight this man. He's hundreds of pounds with hundreds of pounds of armor with a huge javelin and a huge sword. There's no way I want to fight this guy. And don't judge a book by its cover. Another thing is be loyal. Be a loyal friend. If David is the most loyal person that I can think of in the Bible, we read of it that he literally fought off lions and bears to keep his sheep or his lambs, his sheep, his cattle, or his livestock safe. If there's a wolf, if there's a lion, if I'm not armed in any way, this man has a staff. He's got a stick to fight these things off. That's all he has, and he stays. He takes care of it because he's loyal to the animals. He's loyal to his father. He's loyal to his family. He's loyal to the community. He's loyal to the kingdom. So don't judge a book by its cover. Be loyal. Be loyal to your people. Be loyal to the people that have done great things for you, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they've not done anything for you, but you doing good for them could benefit the kingdom. That's the most important thing. Maybe this is not going to be a lifelong, lasting relationship between the two of you, but are you doing kingdom work? Are you doing this for the kingdom? Are you serving for the kingdom? Yes. So do it. Do good. I know Galatians 6:9 always says, do not grow weary in doing good, especially to those that belong to the brotherhood. The last thing that I'll kind of say, and then I'll let Seth say some stuff, is we as men, we as people, Americans, we've been told our whole lives not to be emotional. There's some people I grew up with, they said their dads never told them that they loved them, things like that. David's an emotional human. He plays the lyre or harp, whatever you want to call it. He writes poetry. He sings. He cries out. He writes psalms. He's an emotional person, and he writes these things down. And not only that, he opens those things up to God and says these things. You can go ahead, Seth.
What you were saying reminded me of the verse that we have here, 1 Samuel chapter 16 and verse 23, where it says, "And whenever the harmful spirit from God," this is talking about when David was put into the service of Saul, and it says, "Whenever the harmful spirit from God was upon Saul, David took the lyre and played it with his hand, so that Saul was refreshed and was well, and the harmful spirit departed from him." And like you said, David is known as, we know the end of the story. We know that, two people go into that valley and only one of them walks out. We know that David, wins this fight. He's someone who is victorious, and he will go on to be known as one of the greatest warriors, in the history of Israel. But he was also like you said, a musician. He was someone that had, who wrote poetry. He was someone that was skilled, in that manner. They searched throughout the kingdom of someone who could have this ability to play, the lyre, and somebody knew of David, and they said, I know this guy. He can play really well. And from what we get from this verse, it worked. And so David he's a very, very emotional person. I think if you take a look at the first part of the book of Psalms, a lot of the Psalms that David wrote, some of them are pretty passionate cries, out to God. He was a very, very, very emotional guy. And it kind of reminds me of the verse in, I think it's in 2 Samuel chapter 6, when he's worshiping God, and he's someone that is, going, all out, and he's he's singing and he's dancing, and Michael, his wife, comes to him and says, basically she says, you need to turn it down. You're shaming yourself in front of all the people. You're giving it a little bit too much. But David was someone, he kind of reminds me of Peter in the sense that he kind of has that, that extra gear where he just, goes all in, and someone who is, is, very, very honest and very, open with how he expresses, his feelings and his emotions. And, that's definitely something that we can learn from, in that case. It's, we could do more to be, more open, be someone who is willing to entrust, some of our life to our fellow brothers and sisters of Christ. And because, if we can, one of the best things about the church, about being able to assemble with one another is the ability to support your brothers and sisters and be able to, encourage and to help them bear, the burdens that they have to take. And it's hard to do that if you're someone that's keeping everyone at a distance, at arm's length. But if we can be someone that can be open, someone who is willing to maybe admit at times things that that are close to our life, sometimes things that aren't flattering. I think it's a process for growth, and where it can help us grow in our faith and help others, as well.
The last quick thing I'll say is that I take from the characteristics that we can learn from David is just because no one else has done it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And that's exactly what you have in the circumstances. No one's willing to step up. No one's willing to do this. And just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean that it can't be done. Now, I'm not telling you to go climb Mount Everest or anything like that. You got to be in great physical peak, and then there's a bunch of things that you got to have for that. But like, let's say I'm not going to go to college because no one else in my family's gone to college. So what? Give it a try. I mean, I'm not going to be a farmer because no one else in my farm. I don't know how to farm, so I'm not going to be a farmer. That you can always learn. I mean, there's a lot of things you got to learn. But just because it hasn't been done in your family or around you doesn't mean that you can't get it done.
That is very true. And that's one thing that jumped out to me as well when we take a look at David coming here, because David was someone who defied expectations. He was someone that he wasn't even a soldier. He wasn't even, had any obligation to stick around, for that battle. He was just there to, as a carrier, to present food to his brothers, and to the people there. And in fact, one of his brothers actually got on to him and kind of chided him for sticking around. He said, "You're just here to watch the battle. You're just here to watch the excitement of the battle." But no one expected David, to do anything, and he could have easily just, sat back and not done anything. But yet, he was someone that decided, to take that step, and because he had the courage to do that, and because he was willing to go beyond what people expected of him, he was able to fell a giant. He was able to, be someone who earned a great victory, for the people of God, and that's encouraging to me, because it's easy to just go along with the what is the status. It's easy to look at what people expect of you, and just go along with what you can get by with. But David wasn't content with that. He wasn't content with just going along to get along, but he was someone that knew this was an injustice, that this giant had no right to speak of God in this way. He knew that God was on his side, and so he was going to make a difference, and he did. And so that defying expectations and that courage that David has, go along with the absolute trust that he had in God, is some excellent, I think, excellent qualities that we can get get from him. In fact, Psalm chapter 27 and verse 14, he says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Taking courage, being strong, that's part of who David was. So he had that emotional side, but when it came down to it, he knew that God, he knew that God had his back, and he knew that God was going to be with him. And that is definitely an encouragement, to us when we face, the trials, that we do. Gives us a blueprint to go after.
Mm-hmm.
We have several other people that have chimed in here. Some people that you may know. We've had Doris Berry. She says that she's watching two of our favorites. It's good to have Miss Doris here. She's a wonderful lady. We got Beth Chapman Foster. She's watching from Paragould, and so it's good to have you here. We have Sarah Whaley from. She's from Portia. She comes here at Portia. It's good to have you here with us, Sarah. And Doris says that this man appeals to all ages, children's classes, young adults, and elderly stories of the man after God's own heart. And I thoroughly agree with that. And I think we're going to mention that a little bit more. And also we have Art Smith. He is here with us. Someone who, and Art Smith and Tommy Robinson is here with us as well. So good to have you guys here. I know it's good to have you here to study with us and be with us. But Kiefer, as we kind of get on the kind of the back end of the study, we know that we can learn something from David, but there's also another man in that valley, a very, very big man that's hard to miss. And through his actions and through what he says and through how he comes out and presents himself, what can we learn from Goliath's point of view? What can we learn from what he does and how he approaches this man, David?
Would you go ahead and pull up Proverbs 11:2 for us?
Yes.
In short, the prideful will always fall. Proverbs 11:2 says, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom." So there's that one, and do you happen to have the 1 Samuel 17:41 through 45?
Yes.
So that previous verse made me think. It's completely off topic, but basically made me think of the book of Obadiah. It's just basically talking about how all of Edom is going to fall. Says, and the Philistine moved forward and came near to David, and he stood the shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by God. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give you your flesh to the birds in the air and to the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." And we mentioned that verse earlier. But the two things I've got to say about Goliath is, first thing, obviously, the prideful will always fall. Number two, intimidation isn't always intimidation isn't a lasting motivator. Intimidation is not a lasting motivator. We see him calling out God, saying God is not worthy. He's not here. He's been saying all these things. He calls out David. He says he's going to give his flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Basically rip him limb from limb. And intimidation isn't a lasting motivator.
I think that is definitely true. I had that as well. Goliath was someone who was. you can kind of understand, being as big as he was, being someone who's trained since he was little in order to fight. He kind of knew how good he was, but he kind of going back to the first, one of the first points that you made about judging a book, by its cover. He looked out at David and he thought, what is this? They're going to send a little boy out here to do a man's job. Why? Is this what they really think of me? They're going to send this boy out here, but yet he was someone that would be the last mistake that Goliath would make. And there is, we could spend, and 2 episodes going over all the verses that talk about the danger of pride and how dangerous it is to a Christian and to a person, and how if we build our own selves up, then we're going to be in a position where we're going to fall. But James says we need to humble ourselves so that God can exalt us, so that God can lift us up. And that's one of the biggest differences between these 2 people. David was willing to let God exalt him to a high position, to a victorious position, and Goliath he thought he was already there, and he was wanting to do it by his own strength and his own power. And they realized, when they got after that confrontation, that God is stronger than any one human can be. God is big, he's mighty, and he's someone that is cannot be compared or cannot be threatened by the power of anyone else. No matter how big you are, no matter how skilled you are, no matter how good you think you may be, you're nothing against God. And I think this story of David and Goliath highlights that maybe more than most. And the last thing that I had was just that the Philistines put their trust in Goliath, as you said, for good reason. But we always need to be careful, especially when we're Christians who look to God. Don't put too much trust in people. Don't put all your trust in a person, because as we see with David, even a man after God's own heart is going to fail. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to be someone that has those ill moments. But we always need to be sure that we have our priorities where they are, and that we need to be someone who looks to God as the number one. And because if we put our trust in ourselves or in another person, another leader, they're going to fail us eventually. And so we always need to be mindful of that. But Kiefer, we've been going for about 50 minutes here, and so we're going to kind of begin to wind this down when we take a look at this confrontation between David and Goliath. But as we've already mentioned before, this fight has an ending, and David, he comes out victorious. And sometimes, when maybe if you watch like Monday Night Football or some kind of sports show, sometimes before they start, they'll come up and they'll say, well, here are the keys to victory. Here's what they need to do in order to win this game. So for David, what was the key to victories? In this confrontation that he had with Goliath?
Well, he didn't need a bow. He didn't need a spear. He didn't need a long sword. He didn't need a big shield. They tried to put armor on him. He didn't need any of that. He used exactly what he knew how to use. He used a slingshot in his heart. And then not only that, but he put his complete and utter trust in God. He put his complete faith in God. He put his complete and utter trust that God was going to be with him on this battlefield. And that's all he needed was his heart, a sling, and God. Got the job done.
And I think there's something to be said, of he decided to use that sling instead of the sword that was provided him. That's Saul gave him everything that he gave him the armor of a king, the weapon of a king, but yet he chose to use his sling. I think whatever you use to fight your battles, whatever you use to bring glory to the kingdom of God, you can do that. There is so many ways that you can contribute, and then you can to the kingdom be someone that gains that victory. You don't have to use another person's uh, path to success, you might say, but you can be someone that uses what you're good at for the kingdom. I think that there's a lot to say about that. But I think this has been a good study, and we're so glad to have you on here tonight, Kiefer. Is there any closing thoughts that you have on this man David and this confrontation that they have in the Valley of Elah with this giant Goliath? Any closing thoughts about what took place?
Well, the most important part, I think, I guess I think differently and outside of just the text here, that there's a spiritual battle going on, and that with this victory, there's going to be no doubt now. There's going to be no doubt in the mind of the Philistines or even the surrounding countries that are maybe trying to invade and make life uncomfortable for them, that there is a God in this valley. There's a God with these people, and that their God will triumph over everything. No matter the sword, no matter the size of the man, no matter the size of the armor, that these people will triumph because they trust in their God and they put their faith in God. And it took one man to show the rest of his people what God desires of them. And what we see at the end of the text in 1 Samuel 17 verses 57 through 58. If you would go ahead and pull that up just for the last closing bit. We continue to see the decline of Saul and the increase of David. So he's pulling up 1 Samuel 17, 57 through 58. In 1 Samuel 16 through 21 through 22, it's obviously the text before this, the verse before this. It's when David comes into the service of Saul, and so he begins to play the lyre. We looked at that text earlier, and this is at the very end of 1 Samuel 17. It says, as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, and with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse." I believe is the next portion. I'll get my little Bible out. Yeah, verse 57. Whose son are you? And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite." And so you see at the very end, we obviously know that Saul knows David, and so there's speculation. Does he forget who this guy is? Does he forget? He says, "Who are you? Whose son are you, young man?" David just says, "I'm the son of Jesse." And so in 1 Samuel 16, you see kind of the decline. There's this spirit that's tormenting him, and then here, does he forget who David is? I don't know, and there's this continual decline of Saul and this inclination of David.
And I think after this, David would be put on that path, to stardom. You might say the path to the kingship, to be that king. He would be known as a hero, of Israel, and just right after this story, right after, if you go past 1 Samuel 17, I think it's going to chapter 18, almost immediately. David is blessed with success. He's someone who has, God blesses him in all of his efforts, all of the battles that he takes place in. and people start to sing about the thousands, the 10,000s that David has slain, and they only associate about 1,000 to Saul and 10,000 to David, and that's the point where Saul starts to get a little bit jealous. He starts to get jealous of David, and even though he would become king of Israel, it was a very rough road to get there. And because he had to run from Saul, he would have to be on the run for quite some time, even going to the land of the Philistines for a short period of time, which is hard to imagine after looking at this story. But that was what he had to do. But I think the idea that he put, like you said, he put that absolute trust, in God, and that's, being a Christian is one of the most hopeful and reassuring things I think a person can have, in their life. Knowing that, we have a God who cares for us, that looks out for us, that is invested in our well-being. That's a comforting thing to know. God who can, who has created this world, cares for us, and so that's something that we can put our hope in, put our trust in, because we know that unlike the people who put their trust in the 9-foot giant, God's not going to let us down. God's not going to leave us wanting. He's going to be there for us, and I think that's something to be noted. Art Smith chimes in here again. He says, "Good job, guys. Proud of you. I took intro to preaching with Art and took a lot of classes with Art. He's a great guy." And Nancy Medlock, she says that she is watching, and good to have you here, Nancy. And Doris Berry says good job as well. Good to. I hope that you have a wonderful. I hope you're not snowed in over there like we are down here in Portia. But Kiefer, if somebody wanted to get in contact, maybe with CRC or with the Manila Church of Christ, how could they go about doing that?
You can call me anytime. I've got my cell phone number is 479-595-3452. You can email me kramsey@crc.edu. That's kramsey@crc.edu, and I'll answer either one of those platforms. Typically, if you call me and I don't know your number, I'm going to think that you're trying to sell me an extended car warranty, so I might not answer at first. But if you leave me a voicemail, you might get lucky enough and I might answer. But send me a text. I text, call, email, any of those platforms. You can reach me and reach out anytime. So.
Well, we really appreciate you being here tonight. We hope that everything goes well at the Manila Church of Christ and down at CRC. Hope you guys have a wonderful end to your semester. I know you're counting the days down. You're getting pretty close to putting another year in the books, and so it's I hope everything goes well for you. I want to let everybody know that we'll be back here again next Thursday for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study, and so we hope this is something that has benefited you. Hope this is something that has encouraged you as we study the Word of God. As we said before, if you have any questions or need more explanation about something that we said tonight, please feel free to get in contact with us. We would love to talk to you about it. But until then, we hope that you go out and hope that you are someone that becomes the light of the world, and we hope that you have a wonderful week.